Welcome.
It's just us.
So this is our panel on secular parenting. A parent I am not. Have been a child before though, so I feel qualified to ask questions of actual parents.
Or give us your view as a child.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Because you weren't raised secularly, though, were you?
I was not, which makes me everything I read in preparation for this. I was like, man, that would have been so nice if that were the case. But what's interesting about secular parenting from a sort of objective perspective is that it's obvious that we don't live in a secular culture by and large. We live in a culture that is religious, mostly Christian, and in the United States at least, and that definitely colors the way that policy is made, traditions are made, holidays, family, parenting, all of that's affected by this. And what struck me as an interesting framework to view this topic through was, if you grow up in a church or you grow up in some other tradition, it seems like you sort of already have a cheat book for big things that come up in your life, parenting being one of them. It's like you have an accepted playbook that everybody uses, more or less. But when you say, I don't know that I believe that, all of a sudden it might seem as if you have to start from scratch. And I think that can be daunting for people, no matter what the challenge or task is, to have to feel like you have to do it some way with originality or something. And so I thought it might be helpful to organize a panel of parents who did just that and see where why they made the decisions they did on important topics related to raising kids, as well as how that went. And I don't expect this to be super formal, but I think it would be cool to have, I sent you guys all sort of an outline of different topics, and we can spend as much or as little time on those bullet points as you guys feel is appropriate. But yeah, that's the thrust of this whole exercise, just to see what kind of experiences came out of that endeavor. The first,
Can our panelists introduce
Yeah,
themselves?
good idea.
And
I'm
talk
sorry.
about kids?
What's your credentials?
Kids, age,
Uh-oh, I
Yes.
forgot those.
So yeah, give your names and
Mine's Polly. I'm a parent. I actually was raised secular. I had atheist parents. I was very grateful for that. And but I have 3 kids, 3 different moms, 10 years apart. So the biggest difference for me is that their moms have different inputs. It's not like the one person, and we know how that is. So I've had to adjust each upbringing accordingly.
Oh, I'm Lori, and
I'm Ed.
yeah, and we're married. We met actually in the church. My dad was our youth group advisor. We've got a 16-year-old boy.
We're both teachers,
Yeah,
so we definitely have maybe a leg up.
kid-wise. Yeah, but not secular-wise for sure. Yeah, we're working our way through it though. Yeah, and being raised Catholic. I went 12 years Catholic school. Yeah, so it's been a challenge. Exciting, but you're right. I like what you said about the playbook. Like, we did not have that. We do not
But I
have
think
that.
we did,
Oh, yeah.
in the sense that as teachers, we're trying to promote, good behavior and good habits and, discipline.
Fairness. Yeah.
Fairness and just all those things that schools teach.
True,
Yeah.
yeah.
But we couldn't do it through religion. We did it through
Being
being
human,
teachers
right, yeah.
and community and
Right, true.
I'm curious, particularly for you two, since you say you came from a religious background, was there ever a question in your mind of what's the morality of choosing not to teach your kids religion kind of from the early age as a matter of course? Did you ever wonder, or was it ever brought up to you that, hey, it's more right or more moral to bring your kids up in the church versus not? I feel like I hear that a lot in this conversation.
We feel judged by that often, but it never was a point of discussion between the two of us.
Mm.
It's like,
I mean, there's times where we've struggled with some sort of decision and, getting our boy to do what he should be doing or not doing what he shouldn't be doing. And we's like, well, we can't threaten him with the, wrath of God.
yeah, there will be
So-
no hellfire in this
Right.
house. Yeah.
I remember telling a
Right.
friend of mine that I was an atheist, and he said, "Oh, but your son needs something. He needs some sort of star, something to look,
Mhm.
towards and guide him." He's got us. That's what he's got us. Oh, I can't believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a point where all the ladies in the neighborhood, all of the kids were making their first Holy Communions together. Well, Lori, you haven't sent your son to, catechism school. And I was like, oh, well, we're atheists. And she said, oh, I don't believe that about you. And I thought, I don't know what you're,
Oh, let me just change
But
my
you're
whole
a good
life.
person.
right,
How can
right.
that
And
be?
so that was probably the first time where I went, oh, we're, all right, this is how we're being seen. Yeah, so it was a little awkward, but Yeah.
You look like you had some experience with that as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, totally.
What were some of the things that people might have talked
Well,
to you about?
like when you have your little kid and you're meeting some of the kids, some of the parents, like they go off on the playground, especially first grade or second grade, and okay, I'm going to probably be with these kids and these parents for the next 4 or 5 years. And there were quite a number that would come up, and one of their first questions is, what church do you go to?
Ah.
And you either have to decide to, well, you just say, I'm an atheist, or I'm a humanist, and then, of course, then you have to explain that. But then, or you just say, I don't go to church,
Mhm.
whatever, and then you never talk to them again.
Yeah.
They never, 9 times out of 10, they just
They
don't
don't,
talk to you anymore.
Wow.
Because they haven't got they haven't got to know you first,
Yeah.
Right.
as a person.
That's like the
And
icebreaker
just automatically,
question that
I don't
ends
want
the
to know.
relationship.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want your kids to play with my kids, because
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
gonna say the secret, that there's no such
There's
thing.
no God. Yeah. Well,
It's just like Santa Claus, in the same sense that, when your kid figures out there's no Santa Claus first,
yeah.
I think my child figured that out a lot sooner, having not been raised with a lot of superstition and other things that you were just told to believe. She was told to believe what you could see and what seemed real her whole life. So then when the Santa Claus thing, we introduced it. Well, each mom wanted to introduce it because it was their first child. And it was like, okay, it's fair to let them have that experience. Not so much the kid, but the mom. They wanted the fun of pretending. But there's going to be a point where,
Yeah.
they figure it out really young. And I said, just keep it to yourself.
It's interesting you
Don't
bring
spoil it
that
for
idea
everyone
up
else.
of something, especially at such a young age, the idea of belief in something being more for the parents than for the child. I think that's a really big deal in this conversation is if you're foisting belief of anything on a child, who's it really for? Is it for the child? Because they can't understand it. I think there's a good argument to be made that they have no idea what you mean when you talk about, difficult theological things that by any stretch, by any like if you're going to take a membership class for a church, for instance, you would have to understand these things before you would be seen as a member who understands their faith. Well, if your child can't do that, and you're saying just repeat after me, and that means that you mean it. It's kind of an interesting who's that really for, right? I know that I didn't understand a lot of stuff until I was a teenager, and then I was like, wait a second, I guess I believe this stuff, but maybe I don't.
See, that's where I really can't speak to that, because I always wondered what it was like for my friends that I grew up with even, what's it like to be raised believing these things and being told these things? How did you really believe it, or did you just say what they said to say?
Yeah.
I just didn't have that experience. The only downside for me was that I didn't know what most people were talking about. They talk about Noah, or they talk about some event in the Bible. And unfortunately, I was glad that I was raised with reality, but I think there has to be some religious, like mythology teaching. You know, so that they,
Cultural touchstone.
yeah, I
Sacred
would have liked to have
texts,
known what the
something.
conversation was even
Sure.
talking about. I
Yes,
just
right.
stand there
Right.
and nod because,
Yeah.
you
Well, I
know.
can say on the flip side, growing up heavily indoctrinated, it is, well, I can't say I know for certain, but I would imagine it's a little more scary to have people talking about reality and going, I don't know what that conversation is. Like, I don't feel at home in that conversation.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
that was a freaky moment for someone who came up in the church going, you're talking about science and reality, the nature of the cause. I have no clue what you're talking about, and that kind of freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's definitely like
Yeah.
two sides
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah, or I'd bring up something, you know, that just nonchalantly is a fact about evolution.
Mhm.
And I'd be like, well, you know, dogs get this trait from wolves, and there's the evolution of this species over the millennia. And they'd look at me like, no, God made them like that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the way it's always been. And I just, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. But that's
See,
kind
this,
of.
this makes me happy because we don't have a whole lot of friends who grew up atheist. And our son, we tried to invite him to the last small group meeting we had at our house for our non-theistic friends, and we invited him down several times. Like, I don't belong there, Mom. All of you are talking about coming out of religion, and I don't have that. I don't know that, and I'm the only one there who can't relate. And we did. We've been talking to Charles Hill, who runs the group, the Recovering from Religion, Life After Belief group, and that helped me a lot when we started going a couple of years ago. And there is a difference between feeling good about being an atheist and being able to say, well, I have this rich, decades behind me experience of not having to grapple with these questions, where my son is, and I listen to you and I think, oh, he's gonna be that. That's great. I'm so excited. Oh, good. Like we're, I mean, really. But I think that's an asset.
But just like you teach about Zeus and Thor and Hercules, these myths, make sure that you give them some, and I'm trying to do this with my
Sure.
kids, some general knowledge of the stupid stuff these people believe, because they're not only just looking at it like a story, they think
Yeah.
it's real now.
Yes.
And that he's coming back.
Yeah.
And you have to deal with these people because you're surrounded and you're outnumbered
Yeah.
all the time.
Well, and as an English teacher, I realize how much of Western literature has references to the Bible in it. And so I always, in my English classes even, I always say, for those of you who don't believe or who don't read the Bible.
you really?
I do.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Let me explain, because when we talk about when characters break bread together, what is the idea, what is the concept of communion? Well, my Hindu kids, they
Yeah.
have no, and so I feel like they're
Bread, what?
marginalized all the time. And so I have to be conscious of, and because I'm an atheist humanist, I start going, these kids don't know what they don't know. And they don't have access to films, music, literature that have these illusions. So I think it's important as parents
Yeah.
to kind of say, okay, there's this mythology out
There's
there
this thing.
for so many. And then I'll say, well, in the Hindu religion, what do you guys believe as far as this is concerned? So
I
it's
want to
interesting.
revisit that, but
Yeah,
Scott,
sure,
do you have
sure.
a
Yeah.
comment or question?
I was raised in a nominally religious atmosphere, not nearly as fundamentalist as it sounds like you were, but just, we went to church once in a while and that kind of thing. So I learned the Bible, I went to communion class, and we had this Bible history book that summarized a lot of the major stories in the Bible. And so, as an adult, we have another family in my group that is completely secular. They're just indifferent to religion. They don't have a chip on their shoulder about they was never raised religious. It's not an issue to them either way. They're just completely indifferent to it. And one of the girls, who's about the age of one of my girls, said, can I borrow, do you have a book that just tells me what's in the Bible? I don't want to read the Bible, I just want to know what's in it. And so I gave her my little Bible history book that I used when I was in 6th grade, that I kept all these years. I said, well, this has got all the stories in it. It's got the important stories, Noah and Samson and
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And so she read this because she had no clue, like you said, Paul, what are all these references about? And so she read that and she thought, oh, well, thank you. Now I know what these things are.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting to me to meet a family who had no idea what religion was about, in a sense. and think, oh, there are people like that out there who
Yeah.
just really don't,
Right.
have never known anything
Yeah,
about this.
well, I'd go home and ask my mom about any of those things, you know, and she'd just like, that's bullshit. That's literally what she would say every day. Thanks, Mom, now I.
Yeah, right.
That's not really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, our son's come home with questions, like when he was in middle school, so I actually brought a couple show and tell.
Oh, yeah.
So I looked online, I found some books because I thought, well, I want to show him that there's other stuff out there. So there's this really great book called What Do You Believe? And so it's more of a, all the religions kind of
Right.
perspective. This is the textbook that we use at our school, so I stole a copy to
World
borrow.
religions,
Yeah, we do have a world religions class in our social studies department. Yeah, and then and so my son and I did sit down, and I even have, so then I have this one, what is humanism for kids, and other
Oh,
big
wow.
questions. So we went over this, and then even like the pagan, like celebrating the Great Mother, like so the paganism wasn't necessarily covered in that. So I just kind of wanted him to be aware. So we'd have these conversations whenever a question would pop up. I'd have a book to pull out for him and show him a couple pages, just so we don't have a book. We have lots of books,
Yeah.
and I want to show him all the books. Yeah,
Well, I have a question, Lori, for you
Yeah,
then.
sure.
So when you teach world religions in
That's
school,
great.
yeah.
do parents have like the ability to opt out of that? Like if they don't?
Well, it's not a mandatory course.
Oh, okay,
It's
I
an
see.
elective.
I see.
And the woman who's teaching it in our building now, the majority of kids who are in her class are Christian because the majority of our kids in our building are Christian.
Mm-hmm.
But there is one atheist kid who is the leader of our free thinker club at school, and he's taking the class. And so he's been brave enough to broach some subjects that might not have gotten discussed had he not been there. So I'm grateful that course is offered, but it's not always offered. Kids aren't always interested in it. And we do have a Bible is Lit class, which I know the Project Blitz right now is trying to push into schools. But the guy who's doing it at our school is taking a really fair-handed approach at just keeping it as secular as possible, though he's Christian. And so the kids are getting the understanding. But I'd love to see it sacred texts,
Yeah.
not
As
just
a parent and a
Bible.
teacher, I wanted to ask you about that in particular. Where do you think, like, so Bible as literature is a great concept, but being in America where that is the dominant faith already, it's hard to separate the two without contrasting it with other things. So do you think maybe like comparative mythology would be a better
That's-
approach? Where
yeah,
it's
and
like,
we've talked
here's
about-
a story from
yeah.
the Bible and here's the equivalent of it in
Right.
like 5 other traditional faiths around
Right.
the world, because that, speaking from my experience, I actually learned to appreciate the Bible as literature after separating from it by experiencing
Yeah.
other cultures' versions and reading the Epic of Gilgamesh and learning about the Great Flood story within that and going, oh, that's Noah's Ark.
There's a
you
parallel,
about
right.
1,000 years before
Yeah.
Noah's Ark,
Right.
I thought stuff like that made me go, oh, these are stories that are important to humans as opposed to divine revelations from God. It just gave me the eyes to see in that framework. I
That's good.
was wondering how you felt the kids in your care or at school were perceiving stuff like Bible as literature when they're already kind of inundated with Bible as holy text.
They are. And so that's why I'd like to see it be a sacred text class,
Yeah, yeah.
because we do have a mythology class, we have a world myth. And so that's kind of neat. And so they
Yeah.
do the comparisons of the myths and stuff. And so we try to offer our kids as many electives as possible so they get kind of a feel for that.
I'm intrigued by the title mythology, because you're thereby defining what is mythology and what is not mythology.
Yeah, for sure.
In
Wow.
that course, that's an interesting.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and I think there is there's a canon of texts where this is world myth, this is classical myth, so I think there's a body of works that.
Yeah. Folk
that are
and fairy
accepted.
tale, in the general sense, tend to get lumped into there, but if you get
Mhm.
specific, like you said,
Yeah.
mythology can just mean canon classics
Right.
from Greek and
Yeah.
Roman.
Right.
Yeah.
It would be interesting for me to know, like, how different states handle something like this. That is, I don't know how this works in Ohio. Does the state of Ohio, like, Department of Education have, like, curriculum guidance? And they talk about how to present things like this, and what do other states do? Like, for example, in
Yes.
southern states, is there
Yeah.
a different
It is
philosophy
very
about
different.
this, or do they not even touch something like this?
Yeah.
As
I think
opposed to,
it's local districts. I
is
think
it
they
local
have.
districts, is that how that works? Okay.
Yeah.
And what district are you in?
Cole and Tangy.
On tension.
Yeah.
To keep the structure a little bit here, we've kind of touched on it, but I did want to come back to it. You had mentioned, Ed, that it occasionally becomes tempting to use to wish you had like a divine stick to kind of correct the child, so to speak. But when it comes to instilling morality, when it comes to instilling a sense of right and wrong, where have you guys gone to in order to find something that, well, for lack of a better term, feels authoritative in both your eyes and your child's eyes? Like, do you appeal to their own conscience? Do you appeal to ideas of philosophers? How do you broach that subject with a kid who may not understand what you're trying to do?
So having two educators as parents, our boy is, he doesn't have any way to sneak out and play us against each other because we're on the same page with all that. So we basically hang our hat on, community and responsibility. So it's all about, it's always about the other person. That we have these things that we've been saying over and over since he's been, young enough to understand us. It's not about you. Other people are important. You have to do your fair share. You have to be kind. It's right to be kind. It's good to be kind. We have to take other people's emotions into account before we act.
Empathy.
What have you said when
Empathy.
if they have said, well, why? Who says so?
But
how does that back and forth go?
Pretty much everything. We wouldn't ever get to that because everything we do is about community.
Mhm.
Everything.
We model it, we do
Yeah.
it,
Yes, it's
yeah.
there. He sees it.
Inviting people to our house when we know we have like other things on our agenda, other things to do. Well, we're having these people over because so-and-so lost their mom this week, or so-and-so needs to visit with us, or we're gonna have a cup of tea, and so we're inviting this person over. Who are you inviting over today? And it's not always out of need, it's out of, just, who do you want in your life? Like, and how do you make those choices? And how do you give depth and breadth to your relationships, and not lose yourself? I think
Yeah.
those are conversations we have with him.
We don't like to bully our kid, so he's been treated more of an equal, and sometimes we
Sometimes
laugh.
because he's an only, probably.
But we laugh about
Yeah.
have we gone too far with that? But it was rough early on, but like
9,
all those
10,
lessons
11.
that we've.
Handful.
Right there.
All those lessons that we've been kind of working on since he was really young, we're now finally starting to see,
And he's doing them.
yes, them paying off.
Yeah.
Where it's now his. We didn't force him, we just kept modeling and suggesting and telling stories. We would tell stories about things that happened with our kids.
And asking questions.
Yeah.
What do you think would be the best decision here? And clearly there's the best decision out there. And he would say things like, well, I guess if I was in that situation, I would do this. Well, why would you do that? And just, kind of letting him meander, but within a set path. I think those conversations are still happening.
What were some of the times where you mentioned it was difficult? What made those times difficult, if you don't mind sharing like anecdotes of examples?
When he wasn't getting it.
Right, like what did
where,
that look like, just for practicality's sake?
Developmentally, younger kids, they are the center of their own universe, and they can't share, and they can't empathize. So there are times where we were trying to model that, and we would get the, well, I don't care, this is what I want kind of response to him. We couldn't go, well, Jesus says,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we would just have to, tell stories and lead him through those things. Now he'll say, I'm doing this because, I think he sees himself now as the kind of counselor in his social group.
Right.
You know, the person.
Kids like
that-
to come to. They
Yeah.
trust him.
Yes. So he has that empathy. We
Uh-huh.
didn't force it upon him.
Yeah, right. And even when he tells stories about other kids at school, he leaves their names out. And I remember when he was younger, we wanted to know who those kids were so that we could, run some, reconnaissance and kind of help him out. And he was like, I'm not going to tell you that person's name because I don't want you to not like them, and I don't need your help.
Yeah.
I mean, so I always thought that was, at that 9-year-old age, it was kind
Yeah.
of brave for him to say, I got this. I need to process it. I want to process the situation, not the person with you. And so that was a neat way for us to kind of gain insight into his values and what he, kind of held close to his heart.
So when he wasn't seeing things, in a morally correct way, I don't know if that's right, maybe because of developmental, where he was developmentally, that was tough because we did not have a hammer,
Right. Paul, do you
But I'm
wanna-
glad
I'll
we
just
did it.
share, I agree with a lot of what I understand what they're saying. I think a lot of people use religion as a stick. I think a lot of adults tend to live in fear because of that whole hellfire threat.
Reminds me of the
I
saying,
never had that.
I wasn't a Christian.
Yeah, I
like-
never thought anyone
Right.
was ever looking over my shoulder. God, what a horrible concept that is.
Yeah, come on in. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. But I think the main thing, the word they're touching on, what they're talking about is empathy. I think it's the most important thing you can teach your kid. That's that if they can put themselves in someone else's shoes and think about how would you feel if you were, someone was treating you that way, or if you were that person. That's just what I use more and more and more. And 9 is a tough age. They want to stretch their wings and push back and see how far they can go. You have to understand that, everyone, I just teach empathy as much as I can.
Yeah.
People have feelings, you have feelings, and someday she's going to be on the other foot. The golden rule,
Yeah.
basically.
And it
that-
seems like the low stakes place to have like a narcissistic, selfish streak is at 9
Yeah.
instead of at 29 or
Yeah.
higher. Because
For
then who does it really affect at that age? Not very many people, but when you're responsible for a lot more and you have more sway, maybe coworkers, employees, even. Those lessons unlearned can
Yeah.
be very
Oh, they'll come back and
detrimental
bite you in the butt.
to a lot of people.
Yeah. We do, we go down to the homeless shelters and we give donations, and save her toys and books to give to kids who don't have, and try to teach her, through example as far as, there's people, you want this toy, you can't have it, but you have toys. There's people who don't have toys. Just have some gratitude and empathy. And you don't have to say it. The whole fear side of religion is, I think, almost child abuse. I really do. I would think people that raise their kids to, fear the Lord or
Fear death.
fear damnation and
Yes,
hellfire. It's just like, what a thing to live with
Yeah.
in your head. I
don't understand it.
never, I just, so you don't have that.
Yeah.
You have to also just say, you understand your teacher's the boss, your principal's the boss. You not fear, but you have respect for their authority.
Right.
And I'm your parent, so I'm actually over them.
Yeah.
You have to
Right.
think of me as the king when they're really little. You
Right.
talk about that.
That seems
as
to be more
fairy
authentic,
tales.
though, than the fear.
Well, it's real world.
Yeah, yeah.
There are kings. There are people who have authority over you. Like my boss. So you have to show that respect. It's not because you're going to go to hell, though.
It also-
Welcome, Karen.
Hi, Paul.
Let's take a second to welcome Kara. Kara Lenz. Hey. Sorry you couldn't be with us at the beginning. I know you had traffic or whatever was going on, but if you would, for the sake of the recording, maybe introduce yourself.
I'm Kara. I have a 5.5-year-old kindergartner girl and a 3-year-old boy. That's it.
Those are my credentials, yeah.
That's it.
The other part of the question, were you raised yourself in
Oh,
a
yes.
religious atmosphere or secular?
So kind of. So my dad never went to church. I don't know why. Just never did. But my mom took my brother and I every other Sunday because she was a nurse and worked every other Sunday. So we went usually twice a month. It was in Maine, which is a very secular place. So most of my friends did not go to church. I was kind of one of the weird ones that did. And that, I mean, I really had no close friends who went to church. And most of my congregation was 80 years old or so. So there was very few kids at my church. And it just, I don't think I ever really believed in God that I can remember. I just kind of went through the motions. I had to go. I went, rolled my eyes and left. And, so, but I remember being like, when my husband and I were talking about having kids, and I was thinking, maybe we should take them to church, just because, like, I went to church, like, and he's like, why would we do that? And I'm like, good point. I guess, I don't know why. And so together we agreed, like, we're both atheists. There's zero reason to bring them. It was just kind of like, that's what I went through. Maybe, maybe they'll learn patience or how to sit still, or I don't know what kind of things that I'd maybe
Take them to the
learned.
movies.
So, yeah, I guess we just never thought about bringing them. My daughter's at the point now where she's asking because my dad now goes. I don't know why. I guess because there's no one else to go with my mom, so he's started going. So my daughter's asking what church is. So I kind of do, want to maybe someday bring her to the UU or something so she can see that it's probably pretty boring, but also not introduce her to God, because
That's great marketing for that church.
I've never been myself, but I'm hoping that it's kind of boring.
No offense to our friends of the UU.
No,
Absolutely
no.
not. No, right.
As
Yeah.
energetic
It's
as my
actually one of the
kids
more
are.
fun,
Yeah.
it's one of the more fun churches.
Is
It
it
is
really?
actually, yeah, it's not so bad.
They
Okay,
got-
I'll have to research it before I
Right,
bring
They have
it.
great
right.
music.
Then they may want to go
Yeah, I
there.
gotta
Right,
find
yeah.
some
I've gone many
old school
times.
German Baptist, there's nothing going on in the congregation. So that actually brings up a good, another point here we had is, to catch you up a little bit on what we've talked about so far, is talked about everything you've just discussed, as well as instilling a sense of morality and what source, if there needs to be one, have you thought about or attempted to draw from in order to begin doing that? Because I don't think most people, secular or not, would argue with the fact that being a moral, good person is a good thing and you want your kids to turn out that way. How have you begun to navigate that?
I am not sure exactly what I've done, but my daughter is like probably the most empathetic person I've ever met. And she says, oh, I gave half of my candy away. She's like really hardly ever allowed to have any candy or anything like that. So if she gets some, she will absolutely share because she's like, I didn't want Ryan to feel sad on the bus, so I gave him half of my candy. Or, it's like, so she just really always is thinking about others, always is thinking about people's feelings. I don't know what I did to do that. I mean, maybe I've talked to her about it a time or two, like maybe, I don't know, just throughout talking to her. So she's extremely moral, and it's funny because another friend of hers lies a lot, and I know she believes in God. She lies all the time, like she'll constantly I'm allergic to that, and I'm like, Adley, are you really allergic to that? Because she says she's allergic to many different things because I think she gets the reaction. And I know that her mom has told me that she's not allergic to anything. So I've had to call her out a few times. One time she told me she had pink eye, and I'm like, really? Because she looked completely fine. I was like, should I text your mom and ask her if you have pink eye? And I did. Finally, I did. I actually said, she's telling people she has pink eye. This was like before school one day. She's like, oh, that girl. She's like, she had something in her. So, I mean, she just likes to exaggerate, but my daughter doesn't. If she ever lies, she'll very quickly whisper the truth or, feel guilty or something. So I don't know what it is. I really don't know where kids get that from, but she's pretty good.
It was brought up earlier by, I think, Ed, you were talking about the importance of just continuously modeling what you wanted, as opposed to trying to indoctrinate. And it does kind of seem like, I just, with my nephew and niece, I see this all the time. I don't have kids myself, but the nephew and niece, I see it all the time where they pick up every quirk every single quirk and tick and behavior pattern. So I could see how just it would almost take care of itself in some areas, and then you really have to like dig deep on the problem spots if they crop up. But family and friends is one that I've heard come up a few times. Navigating family and friends who are very religious and kind of expect that should be a part of the way that you raise your kids. It's odd as it is to say, like, most people have this idea of, well, don't tell me how to raise my kids, but I have a few tips for you.
Yeah.
And it seems to be the
yeah.
general gist of it in my experience from watching people. So have you guys had to deal with family and friends wanting to kind of sneak in a bit of religion in the child rearing process for your kids?
I can luckily say that my whole family, even uncles, aunts, cousins, and nephews, are all atheists. So that just spread, But I think one of my brother's wives, though, she's kind of on the fence. She's a little more pagan, a little more Wicca than anything. But that's okay, It's a whole different category. It's supernatural, but it's a category that's not so fear-oriented, at least. But no, I don't get that. But from friends, yeah. There'll be friends, like I said, who even my little girl's gotten in debates with. And then they don't come around anymore because they've gone home and talked to their mom and dad. My daughter was making too much sense. And they had no argument because they've never argued with anyone about their Bible beliefs. Well, why are you even questioning it? Well, let's question it. Well, what about these proofs? Or like have you ever thought about it? And they're like, they start crying. It's like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And, she's eventually found her friends who
That was going to be my
who
follow-up.
are,
is
who
have
are,
you
who
found
are
it to
okay
be
with
isolating?
that. Oh, yeah, it is. And it was for me.
Yeah.
I understand how she feels.
Yeah.
All my kids. You sometimes just learn to keep your mouth shut in the right situation, when you're little. And if it happens to come out, you just got to be yourself and be true to who you are. And that's what I try to teach her. Don't back down, but don't get in arguments. Everyone has the right to believe what they want. Don't say they're stupid or wrong, even though they are stupid and wrong.
Does anybody else want to jump in on this? Family and friends bringing religion in?
We struggle with my parents. My parents said that they wouldn't come to our wedding if we didn't get married in a Catholic church, so I didn't want my dad to not be there, so that was important. And then, of course, we had our son baptized. So we were like, okay, whatever, just fine. And we had talked to the priest at length at their church, where we got married at their church. And we're like, we don't do any of this. He's like, that's okay, I understand. And so as part of our homily, he said, well, Lori and Ed they don't get caught up in the religiosity of things. And that was our little code, so it appeased all the grandparents, made everybody happy. And then when we got Danny baptized, because we didn't believe, it's like, we're just doing this because you asked. It's just theater to us. Really, and we didn't really talk about it that way, but looking back now and seeing the pictures, like his 16th birthday just passed, and we pulled out his first year baby book, and he was like, "That's my baptism?" I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, you haven't even. Yeah, we probably need to talk about that. But I think we still have those conversations with my parents, and at first they were quiet and reserved, but now that he's older, we've let him sit in on a couple of those heated arguments, and not in a way to kind of go, well, let's hear your grandparents firsthand, because we didn't want to be the ones saying, well, Grandma and Grandpa don't believe, so let's interpret their beliefs for them to you. We just never talked about it. And so we let him hear some of these conversations, and he's kind of upset with them at their stricture, at us in our 30s when we're having kids and getting married, that we're compliant still. And I think he sees that that's not the way to go, the bonds that are held on us. But he's having interesting conversations now with people he's interested in dating.
Oh.
And so, you know, and it's like, he was talking to this one girl at school, and he said, oh, well, she's an atheist, Mom. And like, you know, like, she's okay, right? And I said, honey, that's not, it's fine. And he said, well, she can't tell her parents, though. And I thought,
Oh.
well, here we go, because, you know, but I wonder how many more of those conversations he's going to have with, you know, whomever he decides to date, like if that's going to be, you know, what that's going to mean for him.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I'll call you for advice.
Well,
I don't know how to deal with that, because I've never had to deal with it, yeah.
Have you had that, the family and friends?
One time
issue?
my daughter was asking my mom like what church was, and my mom said it's a place where she goes to learn how to become a better person. So I guess that's why she goes. And then mostly, other than that, really, I'm not that close with a whole lot of family members. My brother's an atheist, and so it just really doesn't come up. And then it's more friends of hers that talk about God. And the other day or like a while ago, she told me, she's like, Mom, I believe in God. I was like, really? Which God? She's like, the one with baby Jesus. And this was around Christmas time, so I was like, oh, okay. So we just say, okay, well, you know, Daddy and I don't, but, you know.
Right.
So, I mean, we don't really talk about it a whole lot. We have this book that I
I wanna
read
see
to her.
that.
Yeah, you guys can,
Yeah.
we read
Oh,
this
that's
to her
great.
sometimes. It's a
Yeah.
little over her head. She thinks it's kind of boring 'cause it's not as childish as some of the books that she reads now, but it's good. It
nice
does
that
talk
they
about
publish them.
respecting other
Right.
people's
Yeah.
viewpoints and beliefs, so.
Oh, Bob.
I really like your question, which one?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
right? Because there are so
Because
many.
So often,
I have to remember
that
that.
one with the baby Jesus is defined as the only one.
Right,
Yeah.
especially
And that
here in
question
Ohio.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
Right.
great.
Mhm, Or
It's-
the US,
it's
really.
in my opinion, a brilliant, disarming question.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
like just diffuses the whole
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you.
which one? Cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Right.
and
Yeah.
if there really was an all-powerful God, would anyone really have to ever ask that question?
Yeah.
Ever?
Right.
Right.
That's your proof right there.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that we always try to talk about is that there's this idea, the whole idea of pluralism. You know, like, that's your path. Like, you do you. Don't tell me how to do me, and I won't tell you how to do you. You know, like, I'm not here to recruit anybody. I'm not here to, I mean, this is the path that I have found that works for me. You and I kind of landed on it at the same time. It was weird. I don't even know how that conversation happened. It just evolved.
I was modeling it.
I think that's what it was. Yeah, because you said it long before I did. You felt it before I did, and I was like, oh, like this cloud came off one day, and I went, hey, and he said, oh, already there. Yeah, and so I don't know. I don't want Danny to be judgmental about his friends or what they believe or what they don't believe, because I wouldn't want anybody to be that way with him. You know, and I think respecting that and honoring that from a human perspective is important.
I mean, I still struggle with, you know, I don't share a lot with, unless I have to. You know, like I'm not out at work to everyone
Sorry.
or out with my family. My family is dwindling, so there's not a lot of reason to,
Broach.
yeah, to make some declaration. But, you know, we talk about worldview. You know, that's kind of one way that I'm running the script in my head of if I had to speak with my brother. You know, you have your worldview, I have my worldview. You know, we're allowed to see the world in different ways and still be okay. So, and we talk to Dan about that all
Right.
the time too.
This came up briefly with you, but I think it's a important part of the process to discuss is, you know, we were talking before the program started, and I think you had mentioned a story of someone who came out to their parents as gay,
Yeah.
and they threw him out of the house because it was against their belief system, and he was homeless and all this.
Yeah.
I can't help but see how that's one of the areas where it's the starkest contrast between styles of caring for a child is seeing as like, well, we're looking out for your soul and eternity, so we're going to mistreat you now
Yeah.
in order to drive that home.
Yeah.
Versus, you know what that experience might be like in a more accepting home. And I guess I just wondered, I don't have any particular questions about this, but when you think about the development of your own kids and you know, what their sexual orientation might be, how they choose to date, all these different things that come up under that big umbrella, you know, what are ways of thinking about that or approaching it that you feel like is healthy, that you've encouraged, or that you've found maybe on the other side pitfalls or whatever? You just, what has that been like for you, and how have you felt like a secular approach has been beneficial or not?
Well, I think it's beneficial because, you know, you kind of go with the idea of everyone can be who they are, and no one's going to be damned no matter how weird it is, you know. It's just like, I was actually playing dolls with my little girl, like I remember a year ago. I do that, yeah. I'm a dad.
Hey, yeah, for sure.
And so I like this one real good. Like the car. And she was actually role-playing one of the dolls as being a girlfriend of another girl. And, you know, that kind of surprised me. But, you know, it was something she had heard or saw in a movie or something, and she thought that is acceptable and normal because it was presented to her that way. You know, it wasn't a sin, and it was just that removal of, you know, of the strict box that religion puts you in is what's allowed. I mean, where someone could get totally rejected by their family and have their life end just because of their little book of rules. You know, that's not moral. You know, I mean, you know, morality just comes from having a heart for your fellow man and living a life that helps people live together. As far as you have to look.
We love the commercials that are coming out now where they show a family and it's a, you know, biracial or, you know, same gender, and we always go, we love this commercial. Dan, come down and take a look at this. You know, and
It's a tool.
and we
Yeah,
tell
right, yeah,
and we
right
tell
now.
them, we tell them, listen,
You bring home whoever you
you
want.
bring home whoever you like. We love you. We
Right.
love you unconditionally.
Right.
You be you. You know.
Right.
You know. I know you've said. You know. You like boys, fine. You like girls, fine. You like them both, fine.
Fine.
You bring home whoever.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what color, what religion. We're here.
Right.
We're here no matter what. So, and I think he knows that.
I took him on vacation. We went to San Francisco for spring break, and we got lost in a neighborhood, and he was walking around, and he looked at a house, and he said, "Oh, I could see living there with my partner. We would sit here, and I would sit in the window and read, and we'd have a cat." And I thought, how millennial of you to use the correct term partner, but like how beautiful that he didn't feel the inclination to say he, she, wife, husband. Like that was not even very naturally, not even. He just.
I think once you
Yeah.
enter the city limits of San Francisco.
Yeah, I think maybe, that might
Your
be
language
part of it.
Magical
You have a brain change. But that's just what comes out of your
Right.
mouth. Man.
That's true.
I lived there for
That's
12 years, so I know what I'm talking about.
I don't know if some of you know Brad and Phil. They got married about a year ago. Ben and I went to their wedding, and so my kids, we were thinking about bringing them, but we didn't because it was late. But so we told them they've met them obviously before, and so we told them about their wedding. And so again, this was like a teaching experience for the other little kindergartners and first grade girls that come over, because Delaney's like, yeah, Brad and Phil got married, and they're two boys or two men, and one of them piped up and said no, and then she asked me, you know, Miss Kara, can this I said, yeah, honey, we did go to a wedding with two men, and you know, you can marry whoever you want. And so, you know, I don't know how long this law has been around, I can't remember, but you know, I'm sure it's
Pretty
just
recently.
yeah, it's probably since after this child was born. But anyway, so I mean, I feel like I'm slowly educating people that at least it's okay, and that we're
Yeah.
okay with it, and we're going to these people's weddings. And
Right.
I
things
always
like
thought it
that.
was kind of funny that it was like, well, don't let them know it's a possibility because then they might.
Oh.
It's like
No.
me knowing, like,
Yeah.
me knowing that it's possible to be gay is not going to make me go
Right.
out and be gay.
That's
like,
yeah.
you know,
That's not who
like
you
it's
are,
just.
right.
Well, it's almost.
Tell me about it all you want.
There's
It's
a
not
lot
going
of-
to change my orientation.
Yeah. And there's a lot of parallels between the gay movement and as they used to call it. Maybe it's called different now, but with atheism.
Yeah.
I mean, in the sense
would
that
agree.
don't tell people there are people who don't believe,
Yeah.
because then they're going to get
Right.
that idea
Maybe
that that's
I
a
don't have to,
possibility.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
actually have a choice. No. Don't.
Yeah.
Those people are just evil. Don't talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes along. I wanted to touch back on the sense of, we were talking about how people who get to know you first, like you were saying about your friend. I've had a lot of people, like people you work with, say, for years, and then the subject just doesn't come up. And you're friends, they get along, you like each other, and then they find out you're atheist. And it's like, really? But you're a nice person, or you've never,
Right.
I love that one.
you're
Yeah.
not a prisoner, or you're not in
Right,
jail.
yeah.
How can that be? It's the same as, that used to be the motto of coming out of the closet was, someone who's gay, you just don't know they are,
Yeah.
or you don't know them, but they're normal, good people. And the more you bring it out, the more it becomes normalized, and people realize, oh, these are normal, good people. And I think that's what's happening with us, and really more in Europe, but I think it's happening in America, where they just have to get a chance to know you first.
Yeah.
And that's what doesn't happen on the playground or something when you first meet someone as a parent, and that's the first question they ask you, and then, well, get to know me,
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make that point of there's a lot of parallels in that movement. And the more you come out, as they say, the more people will realize it's a norm, even with your kids. My daughter, I say, stand your ground and be yourself, but you don't have to get on the desk and broadcast it that you're right and they're wrong, and just be you.
I just had something to add. It's not really a question, it's just an observation. And we've talked about this before, which is, everyone has kids for different reasons. And I feel like you do come across people, at least I know with my grandparents, I found out they had 8 children, they're Catholic, and I guess they felt very personal, like they would go to hell if they didn't raise their children Catholic. And I had a lot of family drama because of that. I didn't learn about it until after their passing. And there's still drama because of it. So it's like they clearly had children for their own divine experience or whatever. But just kind of you guys talking about interacting with other kids, it's like, I don't know, I feel like I've met people who are like, but you only exist because someone did this for their own gain, their own spiritual gain.
Oh, boy.
So when you get married with a Catholic ceremony, I mean, you promise to be fruitful and multiply and raise those children
have
as
your
Catholic. I
quiver
mean,
full.
it's sort of
Yes.
like,
To us,
yes,
Right.
I mean,
Keep those
it's a
pews
good
filled.
scam, Hey, listen, this is what you're agreeing to, and, it's in there for a reason, to keep the numbers,
The
building.
tithing coming, right?
And there's all those sacraments that just keep you, moving in the path so that you can do the same thing when you get married and have kids and raise them Catholic. I mean, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant Ponzi
Great
scheme.
scheme, yeah. Well, I touched on something, I don't know if it's one of your questions, but it just reminded me of a thing that you come across also when you get older and people start to pass away. That's another issue.
Yeah, that is actually, well, sort of just the navigating a
jumping
religious
ahead,
culture
but-
is, there's a lot of subsections to that, and one of them is life and death milestones.
Yeah.
There's different stages of your own life, but then obviously while you're going through it, you're always interacting with other people at different stages, and one of those is death, So that's a great segue.
Yeah.
for
Well, I've
this.
lost both my parents about 5 years ago, real close together, and, we just had a memorial, because it's my family, and it was very well done, and, it was nice to get a bunch of family together, but completely secular. But a lot of friends of the family were pouring on the religious, sentiments, and even my little girl's friends, well, they're in heaven now. And it's like, I feel bad enough to have lost, I don't want to get into this debate, but
Yeah.
please just
Yeah,
stop.
with an 8-year-old,
Yeah.
right?
You know,
Yeah,
and-
right, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard enough to mourn, but you just
Sure.
want to say, please.
Sure.
And I said, just let it go.
Yeah.
Just let them say what they want to say so they feel better. And
Mm.
they mean well. The heart is good,
Yeah.
so just leave it. But the question gets raised, well, where are they? You have to deal with that end of the reality of atheism.
And if you
I'm just
was that a
done.
tough conversation to have with your daughter?
I don't think so, because it wasn't removing anything. You know, I wasn't taking anything away that she
Right.
used to
You
think.
hadn't set the
Yeah,
expectation that.
it wasn't taking the candy, as you might
Right.
say. I was just always told her, like, we had a dog that died before them, and it was kind of the practice run, and you'd say, you know, well, they're just done. It's like when a candle goes out, you know, and things like that, or a leaf falls. You have different analogies. It's a cycle of life, and it has to be, or just think how many people there'd be here, you know? You know? You can't just have kids, you have to die also. And you know, well, you'll die too then someday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it provides a greater opportunity, actually, to talk about the purpose of a good life. And if you can tie the end of life into the moral
The living of it.
weight. Yeah, Ed lost his mother and sister 28 days apart about 4 years ago. And Danny was 7? I can't remember how.
12.
12, right? He was, oh, sorry, math. So he, and so we were in it and we were talking about it. And years prior, we had gone and had our wills put together, and we made it very clear that we were going to donate our bodies to science because we were done with the container. Like, we were going to be gone, we weren't going to be there. And so, being teachers, we wanted people to learn from them. And then we found out that you couldn't be an organ donor. So we've recently reversed that. So because that's way more important now. But Danny was very insistent when he was younger. I want a place to go. I want a headstone like Nani has. I want, like, you, and I'm like, plant a tree. And then you can plant another tree if you move from wherever that tree is, because you don't need a spot. And so those conversations have been growing since the funerals, and we've been moving through that with him. But they've been really interesting and actually, you know, facilitated. Are you living a good life? Because this is all you get. Like, there's no reward for you at the end. So you better make, whoever you're talking to right now, better make that count. And so as he's, you know, maturing through high school, I think he's starting to absorb some of the gravity of that. Yeah.
Has the topic of death come up with your kids now?
Yeah, like a week ago, they got 4 class pet goldfish, and they all died by, like, they got them on a Monday and they all died by Thursday. So she was like really devastated on Thursday. She was like so excited
That's
on Monday,
unfortunate.
like it was Christmas morning because they got new pets, and then
Did
by
you put them in
Thursday-
water?
Yeah, I don't
I
know what
never went to the
happened,
classroom,
right?
so I didn't see
Oh,
them
okay.
there, but she was like, so 4 days later, it was like, she was so excited and then like so sad. And I mean, they got new fish, I think, so, I mean, I don't know if the topic of heaven has come up. I know I've heard her friends say it. We haven't talked much about it. We've not had any pets die of our own, or, you know, people
Yeah.
that we know, really. She does know that great-grandma's gonna die, probably fairly soon, I guess. But I mean, she's healthy, it's just 91, so who knows? And my grandmother will say things like, I don't know if I'll be around, you know, by this time or that time, and it's like, you know, I don't know why
Yeah.
she says that, but what's the point of saying, I don't know if I'll see, so, you know, anyway, she says that, but, yeah.
Keeping it real.
I think that is actually an interest, like the idea of death and secular, you know, secular life and secular parenting or just relationships in general is such an interesting thing, because it's the one thing that we all know is like the ultimate constraint, you know, on our existence, on our experience. And I'm, you know, the more I think about death as an adult, as a non-believer, as opposed to when I was younger and a believer, it seems so much more healthy to not assume that there's a heaven. Just when for a number of reasons. A, you know, there was that sort of taking the candy away moment. For me, when I deconverted from faith, I was like, oh, I just lost everyone in my life again who I already lost. I mean, I had a bunch of friends. It was bizarre. Carla was like shocked when she met me and was like, you had how many friends die? It was just like car accidents, things
Really?
like that. It just like, it just so happened that a ton of people I knew growing up had passed away. And I'd always just kind of assumed like, oh, I'm going to see them again. They were all Christian.
Oh.
And then so when I deconverted, it was like,
Losing them again.
I'm not
Wow.
going to see them again. And sometimes it would hit me in waves where it was like, I'd have a memory of them, or I'd do something, I'd be like, oh yeah. And every time before that, when I'd had that memory, I'd gone, I can't wait to see them again and talk about that. But then later it was like, oh shit, that's not going to happen. And it would be devastating. So I do think there is a sort of like, you know, I forget how many years ago now it was, I read an article about some grown kids whose parents had gone to extreme lengths to extend their belief in Santa Claus, had sued their parents because of the psychological damage that it did them. And I thought,
That's
I'm pissed about this. Like, I'm not going to see my friends. I thought I was going to see
Yeah,
my
you
friends.
had it
I'm
taken
upset,
away.
you know?
Yeah, it's worse.
And
It's
I get
worse.
it, yeah. So it just seems so much more healthy to go, you know what, like, let's be real about this. Things die, they decay. Let's spend a lifetime getting familiar with the truth as opposed to creating something that's comforting in the moment, but like, you know, if you ever have that moment of clarity, it's just going to bring you nothing but like stress and anxiety and sadness.
How much more joy life is
Yeah.
without.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not only is there no
Today.
judgment,
Right.
but like no
Yeah.
no moment of judgment or
No,
whatever.
yeah,
but
no.
but there's also
It's
a sense of
purposeful.
urgency to
Mm.
I care about this person,
Be
so why would I
kind.
ever put off
Right.
having the meaningful relationship with them that I want? You know,
Right.
which
Or why put up with something that's negative
Yes.
or abusive?
Exactly.
Because I'll be fine in heaven if I just
Yeah.
let this person beat me now.
Yep.
You know, no, this is it. You
That
better
is a
make heaven
justification of
now
suffering. That's the whole mindset
as close
of a
as you
martyr,
can get
right?
to it. Because the martyr
Is
thing.
I'm going to suffer now for an
And I think
award
that's a
later.
lot of the reason religion was developed, mostly by the people in power, whether it be kings or popes, is that we have all these peasants and serfs who are suffering, and we have to give them something else to look forward to.
Yeah.
And same with slaves. You know, it was a big purpose of religion is to keep the people suppressed. And, you know, let's move out of the dark ages.
Well, it does actually lead into one of the other topics here is, you know, in a lot of religious traditions, there is this idea of discipline, a top-down, iron rod discipline. I remember when I was growing up, thankfully this book came out after I was in, you know, a really young age, but I remember this big parenting trend of like basically training your kids, and it was like literally I forget the title, but and I'll have to find it if anybody in the recording is interested, but it was about dominating your kids, like breaking their will until they obey you, like absolutely, basically. And you see these like trends in religious parenting, and they think like, you know, if I'm supposed to be obedient to God, and I, as the man of the house and the figure of God in my household, everybody should be absolutely obedient to me. And you see that kind of mentality passed down all the time. There are obviously many other alternatives to that, but I'm not sure they're talked about as often. And I was wondering if you guys could share secular, compassionate, caring forms of discipline that you've used or explored, where there is a corrective course that needs to take place, because let's be real, kids need guidance. How have you managed that when reasoning and other things don't prevail? Where does the discipline come in? Or has it? Maybe that's not the case. I don't know.
We just, sometimes there'll be a timeout, but after every timeout, we talk about it. We talk about it so much, you know, so she really understands what she did wasn't nice or was wrong or hurt someone, or, you know, so we always really just talk a lot about any wrong behavior. And I think that really works a lot better. I also watch a couple kids in my house a couple days a week who are devout Catholics. They're young, they're 2 and 3, but like I know the parents really, really are. And they've actually told me before that they slap their kids' hands if they touch something they're not supposed to. I mean, I think they were telling me like,
You
this
can
is what we
smack-
do, you can
yeah.
do that. And I'm like, that's freaky. I would never slap my kid, so not gonna slap your kid or any other kid or anything like that. So yeah, they definitely and you know, it's weird. I do see like if I at all like say no, you know, like not really raise my voice, but just be more stern. It almost like instills fear or cry. I almost see the girl cry. Like one time I said no or something, and she literally cried, and I was like, I was not expecting her to cry
Yeah.
about me saying no. My kids would never have cried about you know, because they're not afraid. I mean, maybe she was afraid that I would. I don't even remember what it was, but it must have been putting someone in danger, like climbing up on the end table or something. And I said, Annie, get down, like
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
stern voice like that. And she was just like started crying. And I'm like, oh. I mean, it's just, you can see already she's 3 and she's already crying. She's almost like that scared,
anticipating a blow
right, of
type
my
of-
like
Afraid.
stern voice. And that's just horrible to see
Yeah.
her be that scared
Yeah.
over something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the talking to is something we've always done also. And it's always, who could you have been hurting through this? Like if we follow out the consequences of whatever you're doing. So if you're going to continue climbing on that end table, what are the consequences? Can you tell me physically what would have happened? Lamps, pictures, bodies, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like maybe even your own, right? So we would ask him, you know, like, okay, let's take 5 seconds out. What was the next thing that we were trying to avoid you from doing? Whether it's, he was at the recess when he was in elementary school, he was playing ghost hunter with the boys at lunchtime. And the woman who was dismayed at the fact that I was Catholic, was not Christian at all, much less atheist, her son was having horrible nightmares. And she called and she said, your son has to stop playing this at school. And so then we had to tell Danny, you can't go to school tomorrow and play Ghost Hunters, I'm sorry. And he's like, what? Like, what? What do you mean I can't play Ghost Hunters? We're just, why? You know, well, and then I couldn't say, well, so-and-so from down the street called, and she said, like, we had to make it legitimate and say, you know, it's really bothering some of your friends, they're kind of having nightmares, and so how are we going to walk through this? You know, we had to kind of, you know, lay it down, but in a gentle way. Like, you just have to reason with them, and I think, I don't know.
Was there any situation when your kid was younger and you have to discipline him? Usually back in India, they discipline their kid as a saying, there is a boogeyman coming. You
Oh boy,
you
that's
have to clean
frightening.
your room, okay?
Yeah.
Or
Wow.
God will not be happy with you. Okay, whatever God. I mean, there are plenty of millions of gods in India. So,
Right, yeah, right, yeah. They're all after.
so does that situation came in your?
It,
How do you handle that?
the more we embraced the concept of humanism, the less we yelled in our house.
Yes.
I mean, we were raised by yellers, and yeah, right. And so as soon as we started going, we had this little person, and then he started yelling back at age 9, you know, and it was like, what are we doing? We're
Yeah.
modeling this behavior, and there was, and I remember my nightmares stopped. Because there was no boogeyman coming to get me anymore. There was no Satan hiding under the bed. I mean, I remember there were paralyzing dreams that I had when I was in middle school and high school, college myself. And my son doesn't have that. And the demons that we brought with us started to dissipate when we realized his humanity. So I think we never really talked about that, though. That's a great question because it just naturally happened.
When we embraced humanism, we became better
humans.
parents. Yeah, but better parents.
Mhm, for
I'm
sure.
actually
Absolutely.
Shocked at I'm not shocked, but I am a bit surprised that a lot of the answers tend to be boiled down to, well, I treat them like a person and I discuss with them what I want, and
Yeah.
it turns out they respond to it, because I think, coming from growing up in a religious house, there's like seminars and all these things on how to play these games with your kids and manipulate them or force them or finagle them into being the version that you want them to be. And it seems that what you're really trying to do is take away a lot of their choices from them. And
Choice of
what
voice.
I've heard from all four of you throughout this whole discussion is, well, I'm just fostering who they are and guiding them towards not making big mistakes. And it sounds so much simpler.
It does, yeah.
And it's so much healthier.
Yeah, I think my answer would be pretty much the same as theirs, though, too.
Yeah.
And along with what you're saying, is use reason and, respect.
Empathy.
Usually if you describe, like, I work in a hospital and I will talk about, I see a lot of stuff come through the ER, and I'm like, accidents really can be bad and serious. They happen all day long. You think you're Superman and you want to fly off the top of the piano or something. This is what's going to happen. And you'll break your bones, you'll be in pain, you'll have a cast, you won't be able to swim, ride your bike. There's a discussion that goes into why I'm just saying, get off the piano.
Yeah.
Because I said so. It's like, you want to try that, go ahead, but this is what's going to happen.
Well, it seems
And they
like-
go, oh, forget
Yeah,
it.
right,
I'm not going to
yeah.
do that,
Yeah.
As
know?
soon as you say, like, I'm the parent, you're the kid, I'm right, you're wrong.
Right.
And they go, okay, I'm the kid, I'm gonna be wrong, and they're just.
I was just going to say that. I was like, well, a lot of times
Yeah.
the idea of discipline as like something you have to like prepare for and be like strict with, it really is like when you draw a line in the sand that pits one person against the other, then you're setting the stage for some type of big rebellious scene, right? But if that stage is never set in the beginning, I mean, I've heard it from all of you in different words that, you're not creating a combativeness between yourself and the child in the first place. So like that girl, for instance, might come to an age where when someone says sternly, she doesn't just cry, but she lashes back out.
Right.
And I know from my experience, I wasn't a yeller until I got tired of getting yelled at. And then I started yelling, to your point too. And it just makes me think, maybe for the first time, like how interesting that is that, if you're not even starting from that place, how rare the super rebellious, like, child might
Right,
be. I
right.
mean,
Why,
who knows?
why would they? There's no battle. We're on the same team.
Yeah.
I've got your back.
Right.
I'm going to help you be
Yeah.
who you are. You can talk to me about anything. That's kind of how I want to go raise her, because I didn't feel like I could talk to my parents about
Yeah.
much.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And so they can come to me with anything, whether it be friends or drinking or, she might not still want to do that, but
Yeah.
at least to know I'm not going to judge her or be mad at her. We can talk about things. Hopefully then that will be helpful to her later on, And my son too. He's just turned 3, so it's, I just keep focusing on my daughter.
As they get older, you do there is nothing wrong, or has nothing to do with religion with saying, there's consequences, but you can calmly explain to them, if you don't do what I say, the consequences may be you don't get something,
Yeah.
or something that you like gets removed. Those things still go far. That's normal parenting, It's like punishment is still punishment. It doesn't have to be in the form of demeaning them, putting them down, yelling, or hitting. It can just be, it's like a law. You break a law. I said, don't
You get a penalty. of
don't
some
eat
kind.
those cookies, and you ate them, then you don't get video games for a week.
Yeah.
That's
It's
exactly
like,
what I
that's still a consequence. That's a punishment, but
Yeah.
it's logically
Right.
based,
Right.
and now
Yeah.
Yeah.
this
yeah.
is how it
stomach
is.
is
I still
coming.
have
It's
that
hard
authority.
to it's hard to reason as a child.
I don't want to remove that we just say
Why you got
deep
hit.
conversations all the time. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's like, no, you lost,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
and I'm the boss.
Right.
But we're going to talk about it. This is
Yeah.
this
Right.
is just how it is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
What-
Next.
Last summer when my daughter was 4, she went to her friend's house without telling anyone. I think she actually told my husband that Mom said it was okay. Or like he said, I don't know. I think she actually just left because no one knew where she was. We couldn't find her inside, outside, anywhere. So we found her down at her friend's house 3 doors down. And so basically, we took away the TV for a week. She had no screen time whatsoever. And so every time she asked to watch TV, so you went to Carmen's house without telling anyone. So
Oh, yeah.
you cannot watch TV. So it was like every day we brought up the whole, every time she asked, it's
Yeah.
like we went over the whole thing again. This is your consequence. And she has only done that once since. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
We had one night where our son had a bunch of his buddies over in the summer. They were young, 12, and because he knows we value conversation and we talk about everything, they were gone for some time. And it was midnight. And we're starting to go, the kids should be coming in the house. Like, there's a huge school lot behind our house. There's a pavilion and swing set and all that. So we thought, well, if they're at the school, that's fine. We didn't hear them. So Ed ran over and looked for them. Where the heck are the kids? I get a text from Danny, a map, iPhone, screenshot where they are. Like, they're a mile away, walking down a 55-mile-an-hour road. They're gonna go see their buddy who didn't get to come over that night.
Oh,
It's like,
man.
what?
Oh, man.
And so there was a conversation, but then I thought, he sent us the picture. He wanted us to know where he was.
Aw.
He was still reporting, like, and he knew there would be consequences, but he
Didn't want to worry you.
didn't want to worry us so much. This is where we are. And look, Mom, I told you where I was. And so, like, it reminded me, you went to Carmen. Well, they were going to Ben's. It's no big deal. But, whew, yeah, there's,
You're 4 years old. Like,
well, and I've
any
got-
car can
yeah,
swipe you up.
Right. Well, he was,
Yeah.
at this time, he
Well,
was
yeah,
12.
right, no,
but, like,
yeah.
and of course, that woman's son was at our house again. So that was the last time he's ever come over. So between the ghost hunting and the walking out at night, like, we're just not trustworthy parents.
Just off.
So, but it was kind of, so, the next night it was like, okay, glad you guys are safe. We're in charge of these boys in the house. And yeah, that was tough though. That was a hard conversation. But he realized he was wrong. There were some strictures put down after that. And they were, okay, since we can't trust you,
He's
you're
trying
gonna
to
wander.
lighten his sentence.
I think so, right?
Say,
Yeah,
well, I at
probably
least
right.
told you where I was.
Right.
Get some
Funny.
leniency, you're on parole.
Yeah.
I mean, if they ever try to manipulate you, use your logic against you. in a
Right.
way,
Oh, yeah. And that will happen. I mean, it's. Oh.
That's
But
okay.
you want him to do
You
that.
want
I
him to
mean,
do that.
you want him to practice. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, come
The
on.
thing about
Yeah.
that, like you just mentioned, you get a phone screenshot. That's the biggest difference. One of the big differences between kids now and when we were raised, and that goes for all of us in here, I'm sure. It's like the communication is so much more real time. It's I get texts all the time, even when my kids aren't with me. And I mean, when I left the house to go play for the day, my
Yeah.
parents didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
And I wasn't
had no idea
responsible
what
to
you
tell
wanted.
them, but now
Right.
it's like that's constant
Yeah.
communication. That has nothing to do with really secularism. It's
I
just
love
that
that, though.
you get a lot more
You
information,
do.
and it's
Right.
expected.
Yeah.
If I
It's funny.
see or hear from you before dinner, you're gonna be punished.
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
other way.
Yeah, that's the other way
Yeah.
around.
Go
Don't
and
come
disappear.
back till dark.
So funny.
So a few, to highlight a few takeaways and then ask one last question. So I thought it was interesting, and I kind of already touched on this, was that some of the things that religious parents feel like needs a lot of time and strategy seems to kind of take care of itself, such as like the discipline and the accepting of, developing into an individual who might have different values or sexual orientation or any of these things. Those tend to be things that everybody here is like, those are all great. Like, I hope they develop into a blossoming, unique individual that may or may not share my exact tastes and whatever. But the few things that I've heard that were challenging were the isolation, that being known, basically the cultural stuff, navigating friends, family, and the isolation of being a secular person or individual in a religious culture. Which brings me to my last question is, if there's other challenging things, please bring them up, but insofar as that goes, how can a group like ours be more helpful to parents who are trying to raise secular kids, either by providing places for them to feel less isolated or by addressing some other challenge that you guys might?
Well, I'll jump in just to say, I think it serves a really big purpose, and already has for my kids, because they don't feel as alone. I mean, when they see 20 kids who all believe one thing or some form of superstition of whatever category, and they're only, and then me, you know, I'm greatly outnumbered, but I'm the one telling them what I think is true. They start to go, you know, it's 20 to 1 here. But when you bring them to a place, which I have, when they see another 20 people who agree with me and think it's normal, and other kids, that it means the world. I wish I'd have had that as a kid. I felt much better.
Yeah.
So that's the best thing, is to have that community.
We took Danny to Camp Quest, which was something, this is like a double-edged sword for us, because we took him to Camp Quest because we thought it was a great idea, but our kid's not a camper. He don't like to stay outside, he don't like to be in nature, he don't want to stay in a cabin, he don't want to shower with other people. And so like all that, like everything that was appealing, like to address the humanist side of us was met. Camp Quest was amazing, but there needs to be another vehicle, and I think there isn't that opportunity yet. There's also a book I think that a lot of parents might, the Young Atheist Survival Guide, helping secular students thrive. It's set up in a kind of a question and answer kind of thing, and the chapters are very reader friendly. But things that kids, as they get older, are going to have to face, how to go about navigating through community service. Every time you want to volunteer somewhere, there's some church involved with it, you know. And
Yeah.
Dan's sitting back going, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to be part of that. So it's hard when you're only 14 to know where you fit. So that was really helpful.
What would you say were maybe missed opportunities that a group like ours maybe could have provided him? You know, if it wasn't a Camp Quest, what would have been something that he would have appreciated?
Excuse me, like a teen night. You know, just getting kids together, and you know, who you listening to, who you reading, who you like, a media thing, and kind of just letting them grab their phones and hook up to a screen larger than life, and they go, what videos are you watching? Oh, watch this. And
Yeah.
they could spend hours doing that, and it would be a way for them to connect and talk and, you know, realize that there's more out there than just themselves. And I think that's the hard thing, because we are a minority, and you can't look at us and go, oh, you must be atheist. You don't, I mean, there's no way of knowing. And so until somebody asks, or until you are out, there's limited opportunities for connection. And so I think getting our kids together in the same room would be beneficial.
So not even educational, just purely like community and social,
Just-
just letting them
that
know
would be
they're not
ground
alone.
level.
Yeah, yeah.
And then who's willing to stick around? Who do you got? And then
I'm all for that. I
let's
just
do that.
think it's sometimes felt like as
Excuse
a
me.
planner or as an organizer, you think, well, we're this and we need to be, you know, always on some type of a message, but that's definitely not the case.
Nope.
But,
Yeah.
There is it's just really great that we have this, that we are here now together.
Yeah.
I see some people walking on the street with the, Darwin eating a Jesus fish, and I'm like,
You're my
awesome,
people.
that's great.
Yeah, right.
But like, I wish you would come to something once,
Yeah.
because I know if you think about it, I don't know how many people are in Columbus, but there's got to be a ton more atheists than ever come
Right.
to anything, and
Yeah.
they just don't know about it.
Yeah,
don't
why
know
don't we like
about
to gather? I
HCCO.
don't know.
Don't know about. I brought
Yeah.
a friend of mine to OA last Tuesday, and he's like,
This is a thing.
yeah, a lot of people are just so blown away. So maybe if
Yeah.
it was more, I don't know, it's just like,
or visible.
yeah, something,
Yeah,
because people
uh-huh.
don't know that these things, the HCCO or any of these
Yeah.
groups in the core
Right.
exist. And it's just nice to have that, because I have brought my daughter to, you've met her, at brunch many times.
Yeah.
And I've brought my friends to the National Day of Reason, or my kids to there. And so it's good that we have this sense of community, because like I did grow up volunteering at, like the church basement would have the church dinners or
Yeah.
whatever. So I mean, I did kind of grow up in a community of a church, and so it's nice to still be part of this community, and to,
Yeah.
and for kids to know that these people that are similar to your parents or whatever exist. So it's really nice that we exist. I just wish more people either knew about it or took the time to come every now and then.
It's funny, growing up in a church, you have like all these memorable experiences as a kid that have nothing to do with doctrine or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all
Going
true.
on, you know,
The hayride.
Yeah, it's a
the
hayride,
hayride,
right.
the cornfield
Yeah, right.
maze, the
Yeah.
you know, all these different activities that you're like, I love that, like that was so great. And you know, we used to do the church would have a fundraiser and they would pay for like, I don't know, $10 outfield seats for a Reds game, and like 15 of us kids would get to go to a game together with like the youth pass or something. Things like that
Yeah.
are so meaningful, and they have nothing to do with like
Right.
anything but just being with other kids.
Yeah.
And I would love to see stuff like that. I'm glad to hear that's what you guys are talking about, because I think one thing that Lori and I have talked about is for the kids at her school is having a night where kids who are in secular groups at their school, we can have like a cross-campus type thing where multiple schools can come hang out here and meet other kids. And I thought, why just limit it to them? Like, why not any kid in Columbus?
Right,
Like
yeah.
that'd be
Yeah.
really neat.
That is cool.
Yep, for sure.
I think the more you can do to link families together, then the kids
Yeah.
are a part of that.
Yeah.
You know, so getting families to do family things, and bring their kids. You know, I think that's where we need to go.
My kids come to the Flying Spaghetti Monster dinner every fall, so they
Yeah,
do things like
that's a
that
good
with
one.
us.
And summer
Yeah.
picnic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a
All
good
those
idea
things.
to start thinking in terms of what can an entire family do and enjoy together, because the kids' activities are great for the reasons that we talked about. It avoids the isolation and the peer pressure. If they know, well, here, yes, I'm outnumbered, but there,
Yeah.
they got my
Yeah.
back. That's
Right.
one thing.
Yeah.
But then the family aspect is a related but different,
Right.
approach. So that's awesome. Thank you
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
Thank you for participating. I think.
For doing this. It's really
Thanks for
insightful.
setting
Thanks for
this up.
having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Good. Yeah. Thank you.